All right, so let's get to the story. So maybe you heard about this. So there's Pete Buttigieg, and he's the South Bend mayor. It's Mayor Pete. It's got a catchy term. Mayor Pete. But Mayor Pete is been suspect to progressives for a while, and it's mostly because he's not a progressive, and that would be why. And right now he's going to commit a mortal sin. He's going to make an equivocation between Bernie voters and Trump voters. And here we go.
They're fine, like unemployment's low, like all that, like the set GDP is growing, and yet a lot of neighborhoods and families are living like this recovery never even happened. They're stuck. It just kind of turns you against the system in general, and then you're more likely to want to vote to blow up the system, which could lead you to somebody like Bernie, and it could lead you to somebody like Trump. And I think that's how we got where we got.
So if you couldn't hear, it's not the best audio, but I'll tell you what he said. He said that, this economic recovery left a lot of people behind, a lot of neighborhoods behind. And so then they get angry at the system. And so then they want to blow up the system. That's what he said. They want to blow up the system. And so they end up voting for Bernie or for Trump. And that's how we got where we are. Wow. That, yeah, I guess you voted. Yeah, okay, you voted for FDR or you voted for Hitler. Either way, that's wrong. No, like what do you so Pete? In case you don't know, Mayor Pete is a tool of corporations, and that's why he attended a meeting earlier this year in New York City with Nancy Pelosi and donors. And the whole point of the meeting was to figure out how to stop Bernie Sanders. Why do they care about stopping Bernie Sanders? Why does Nancy Pelosi want to stop Bernie Sanders? Why does she care who the Democratic president is? Why does Nancy Pelosi care?
Because we're capitalists.
Because we're capitalists. That's right. Because she's bought and paid for, and she does the bidding of the donors, not the voters. Nancy Pelosi's to the right of Trump voters. Nancy Pelosi's not a lefty. She's not a liberal. Nancy Pelosi is to the right of Trump voters. So is this guy. Because Trump voters are for Medicare for all, and they're for free college. Guess who's not? Is he for Medicare for all?
No.
No.
No, he is not.
He's for Medicare for some.
Yes.
And for others, no.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, he's not for Medicare for all.
Okay.
And Tulsi and Bernie are the only two Democratic candidates for president that continually talk about raising minimum wage. The Democratic Party needs to change, and they cheated Bernie in 2016. It's a rigged system on the Democratic side. Bernie Sanders got cheated in 2016. That's not Alex Jones talking. That's Joe Scarborough from MSNBC, one of their morning hosts, talking in April of 2016. Here's one piece of evidence Bernie was cheated in 2016. Wyoming gave 18 delegates to the Philadelphia Democratic National Committee convention in June of 2016. Bernie Sanders won 56% of the votes. Hillary got 44% of the votes. But according to the Wyoming Democratic Party rules, Hillary Clinton got 11 of the 18 potential delegates and Bernie Sanders got 7 because they used something called superdelegates to allocate actual delegates. And this happened time after time in state after state, and that's why it was Clinton versus Trump, and that's why she lost.
Tulsi Gabbard is far more dangerous to them than even like Trump. Like,
yes,
they'd rather have Trump in office than have someone who's actually trying to tear down the military-industrial complex. Right. It's terrifying to them, and that's why they were ready. The moment she, floated that she was about to run, they just released all this shit on her, like just stuff from when she was 22 and everything, because they've been waiting for this to trash her, and of course she's being primaried. Like far left progressives or whatever are far more dangerous to the corporate Democrats than corporate Republicans.
No doubt about it. Again, it's this I didn't say this, I repeated it though, but the first order of business for the Democratic Party is to defeat the candidate who's representing the workers.
But first up, he is the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and author of Shortest Way Home, One Mayor's Challenge and a Model for America's Future, Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
Wow.
You're blowing up, man. You're blowing up.
Feels good.
Yeah, I bet you it does. Now, did I get the name close?
Yeah, close.
That's it. I read it's boot, edge, edge.
You got it, Buttigieg. Yep. Just like it looks.
Let's call you Pete. Okay, so yeah, you are blowing up. I mean, wow. I must admit, a few months ago, I was just, you know, who's this guy? Young.
That's fair.
I'm not going to ask you the age question because, first of all, I've heard you answer it now, and I don't think it's relevant. So, but why are you suddenly rising in the polls?
Well, I think part of it is that people are looking for something completely different. And, you know, we're in this moment. I really believe that
I thought
often
we got
with,
that.
Well, in a way, we did, right? I mean, each election in many ways produces somebody who's the reverse of what we just had.
True.
And you could argue that it doesn't get more different from this president than a laid-back, intellectual, young gay mayor from the Midwest.
Things first, a lot of people are asking, how do you pronounce this guy's name? It's pronounced Pete, okay? It's like peaches, but you just stop, all right? Pete, that's it. Oh, and as for his last name, we're still figuring that one out.
Pete Buttigieg.
South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg. I always say his name wrong. Buttigieg.
Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
Best way to pronounce your last name.
Buttigieg, but around South Bend, they just call me Mayor Pete, and that's fine with me.
What has he done?
For a guy who's only 37, Pete Buttigieg boasts an impressive resume. First elected mayor of his hometown at age 29, a Harvard-educated Rhodes Scholar, as well as a lieutenant in the Navy Reserve.
Took an unpaid 7-month leave during his mayoral term for a deployment to Afghanistan.
Not only the first openly gay presidential candidate, he's also a newlywed.
Would be a president of first, the first to be elected in his 30s, the first millennial, the first openly gay commander-in-chief, and the first mayor.
This is the only chance you'll ever get to vote for a Maltese-American left-handed Episcopalian gay war veteran Mayor Melania.
How many languages do you speak?
It depends what you mean by speak. So I've gotten pretty rusty in my Arabic and my Dari, which picked up Dari on my way to Afghanistan. I can still kind of read a newspaper in Norwegian, but only slowly.
Bonjour, je suis Pete Buttigieg de South Bend, Indiana. Peuple de France, je voudrais dire que nous partageons la douleur aujourd'hui, que la cathédrale de Notre-Dame, c'était comme un cadeau à l'espèce humaine. أهلا وسهلا أنا بيت بوتيجيج رئيس مدني في مدينة ساوث بند إنديانا. Hay que establecer un sentido de inclusión en nuestro país y no solamente en el asunto de inmigración, pero en todos los asuntos económicos y los asuntos de seguridad que estamos juntos. Salam, Pete Buttigieg hasta.
FAIR is a organization that looks at media bias and tries to point it out to the American people. And this is an analysis they did of who was being covered by the mainstream news from January 1st of 2019 till April 11th. And this is the percent of media mentions. So when the media was mentioning a Democratic candidate for president, 17% of the time they were talking about Bernie Sanders, 15% of the time they were talking about Joe Biden or Elizabeth Warren, 14% of the time was Kamala Harris. Tulsi Gabbard was mentioned 1.1% of the time, even though she announced her candidacy in late January. Mayor Pete announced his candidacy for president in late March of 2019. So he had the last week of March and basically the first week and a half of April. He had roughly 20 days where he was covered by this survey, yet he got 1.8% of the media mentions. And if you scroll down here, you'll see Tulsi Gabbard was running for president from late January through April, and Tulsi was mentioned on the media. She was on TV mentions 269 times. And Mayor Pete, who was running less than a third of the time during this window of their survey, was mentioned almost twice as much. He had 436 TV mentions. So again, this is more evidence that the media is creating Mayor Pete's candidacy right before your very eyes. Because they're mentioning him, he's polling as more popular because more people know who he is.
No. You are right. I mean, we hear the stories about you like you found a book you wanted to read, but it was not translated from the Norwegian, so you learned Norwegian. I don't know what Trump is, but you're the opposite of that.
And the media support continues in May. This is May 2nd of 2019. Time magazine cover story. Mayor Pete's unlikely untested presidential campaign. This is very similar to what happened in 2007 with candidate Obama. He was a first-term senator from Illinois. He blew up because the media covered him, and they talked about all the ways Obama was a unique and unusual candidate for president. And Obama rode that wave of support into the White House. And I strongly believe this is the man that'll be going up against Donald Trump for president in 2020 because he has the media behind him and he's being propped up by the media and he has an unusual backstory. Oh, you're a Harvard-educated Rhodes Scholar? How did you serve only 7 months in a combat tour in Afghanistan? Were you put in that role to make you more popular if you ran for president someday? Most people who serve in a foreign theater of war like Afghanistan or Iraq, they're there for at least a year. And he somehow got a 7-month tour of duty in Afghanistan. That seems a little suspicious to me.
Hello, Pete. How are you?
I'm great, thanks.
Thanks for being here. And you're surging in the polls. Like all of a sudden, I mean, you were doing well, but I think now it has you like number 3 in some cases behind Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, which is incredible. I mean, it's happening fast, right?
Yeah, I mean, a month ago, we were just trying to get people to be able to say my name. Thanks for clearing that up, by the way.
Buttigieg, yes.
See?
I'm sure you had problems your entire childhood.
Yeah, I can't even tell you some of the different ways my name got said over the years. But the good news for me is elections are multiple choice, so you don't have to spell it or know how to say it. You just have to be able to pick it up out of a lineup.
Yeah, and hopefully people will. But you haven't even announced yet. I mean, would you like to announce here? You should announce here.
The next clip is a recap of how CNN was so excited about Mayor Pete's candidacy. I went to Wikipedia and did some research on Mayor Pete, and I found some interesting information. It appears to me Mayor Pete is part of the Washington, D.C. inside crew. He's a pro-war, pro-military industrial complex Democrat. And that's not just based on his military service in Afghanistan. Tulsi Gabbard served in the military, but she's an anti-interventionist, anti-military industrial complex candidate. Well, Mayor Pete from 2004 to 2005 worked in Washington, D.C. as conference director for former Secretary of Defense William Cohen's strategic consulting firm, the Cohen Group. He also worked for several months for Senator John Kerry's campaign. If you're not aware, Senator John Kerry, Secretary of State under Obama, who was directly trying to topple the Assad regime in Syria. After serving time in Washington, D.C., working for this defense contractor or defense consulting group, he went to Oxford where he got his degree. Then he went to Afghanistan, serving that unusually short 7-month tour, where he spent most of his time as the armed driver for the commander of the local Bagram Air Force Base. So Mayor Pete's candidacy, it appears to me, is supported so strongly by the media because he's part of their pro-war, pro-corporation crew. And he's been trained and groomed to be a candidate for quite some time.
For a guy who's only 37, Pete Buttigieg boasts an impressive resume. First elected mayor of his hometown at age 29, a Harvard-educated Rhodes Scholar, as well as a lieutenant in the Navy Reserve.
Took an unpaid 7-month leave during his mayoral term for a deployment to Afghanistan.
In March and April of 2019, as I watched the media hype up and support Mayor Pete's presidential candidacy, I kept thinking to myself, I get it. They're supporting this guy to take steam away from the real progressive military veteran who could change the country. Her name's Tulsi Gabbard. And if you look at how the accomplishments of both individuals, Mayor Pete and Tulsi, stack up, it's almost a side-by-side matchup. Yes, they both were elected at very young ages to positions. Tulsi was the youngest woman ever elected at the state legislature of Hawaii. She served two combat tours of 1 year each in Iraq. She's a major in the military. She spent more time in Congress than the last 6 presidents combined. She, for 3 years, was vice chairperson of the Democratic National Committee, and she fell out of favor with the DNC when they saw the DNC was cheating Bernie in 2016. She resigned in February of 2016 in protest and endorsed Bernie Sanders for president. Additionally, she is Polynesian American. She's a Hindu. She'd be the youngest person ever elected president and the first woman elected president. So I believe Mayor Pete's candidacy is well created and crafted as a counter to this excellent anti-war progressive Democrat, Tulsi Gabbard.
More political news. I heard that 37-year-old Democratic candidate Pete Buttigieg has been gaining in the polls, and now he's third behind Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. He said he's got a great strategy to beat Biden and Bernie. He's just going to make it to 2020.
I have decided to run and will be making a formal announcement within the next week.
Representative Tulsi Gabbard, a Democrat from Hawaii, announced January 11th that she will run for president in 2020. The 37-year-old was the youngest person ever elected to Hawaii's state legislature when she was just 21. She was also the first Hindu member of Congress. Gabbard fought in Iraq with the National Guard before winning her 2012 congressional race in Hawaii's 2nd District. She serves on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and has been a critic of foreign military intervention.
The U.S. must end its support for Saudi Arabia and stop waging interventionist wars that increase destruction, death, and suffering around the world.
Some on the left view Gabbard skeptically. The Congresswoman has raised concern among Democrats in the past when she criticized Obama's strategy on Iran, ISIS, and Syria.
The administration is misidentifying the enemy and their motivation.
A small body of determined spirits.
She resigned as vice chairwoman of the Democratic National Committee in 2015 to endorse then-presidential candidate Bernie Sanders. Gabbard was one of a handful of Democrats who met with President Trump during his presidential transition, reportedly to discuss a national security job in the administration. She also caused controversy and alienated some Democrats when she met with Syria's President Bashar al-Assad in 2017.
I believe that if we profess to care for the Syrian people, if we want to end the suffering for them, we have to be willing to meet with whomever we need to.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has defied the White House's wishes and met with Syria's president. She sat down with President Bashar Assad Wednesday as part of a tour she and other members of Congress are taking through the Middle East.
We came in friendship, we came with hope, we came determined that the road to Damascus would be a path to peace.
Your position on Syria is one that I think people have misconstrued. Why don't you tell me?
That's putting it nicely.
That's trying to put it as nicely as possible.
Yes.
They've actually said that you are an Assad supporter. I know this is not correct.
Yeah.
But is that one of those things where people just say that in order to sort of diffuse you, to categorize you as a ridiculous person right off the bat, where no one could take anything else you say seriously?
Yeah, it's the usual tactic of trying to smear or vilify me and my campaign and what I'm advocating for, because they don't want to engage on the actual issue itself that I'm pointing out about how devastating and costly their policies are of continuing to wage these wasteful regime change wars, of choosing to support terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda in Syria, directly in Syria, because they are the most powerful force on the ground who's fighting to take out the regime, Assad's government. So they're so focused on toppling this government in Syria that they're willing to actually use taxpayer dollars to provide direct and indirect support to Al-Qaeda terrorists in Syria. When you think about how crazy this is, it makes me angry. I think it makes most people angry. It's why I introduced legislation called the Stop Arming Terrorists Act. Why we would need to have such legislation is beyond me, but clearly we do, to make it so that we don't have any taxpayer dollars going directly to provide any kind of arms or support or anything to terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, but also to make it so that we are not providing support indirectly through countries like Saudi Arabia, who are providing that support to terrorist groups.
So what has been said of you about Assad and your position on Assad that's just been an outright lie?
Virtually everything. I mean, I'll just tell you what happened. I went to Syria to meet with Syrian people, to hear for myself from them about what was happening there. While there, I was offered the invitation to meet with the president of Syria, and I took it because I think it's important for us to have the courage to meet with leaders, whether they be friends or adversaries or potential adversaries, if our focus is on national security and on peace. So I went and I had that meeting and I asked some tough questions and heard from him his perspective on what was happening and what he was doing in his country, and took the opportunity while there to meet with religious leaders, college students, members of the political opposition, small business owners, women who are working to start their own business to empower other women, Shia, Sunnis, Muslims, Christians, Catholics, people of all different religions. It is because of that and that meeting and my staunch opposition to regime change wars in Syria and in other countries that political opponents and others have chosen to try to smear me, my reputation, and my campaign.
Like so many of you, it is painful and disheartening to see how much divisiveness is being fomented by those who wish to tear us apart. We have people in positions of power who are not thinking about the well-being of the people and our planet. Where is that conversation about the needs of our people? Where is the conversation about peace? Every time we launch these interventionist regime change wars, it is not only our veterans who pay the price for that. Every single one of us pays the price. We have spent trillions of your taxpayer dollars to pay for these wars, taking those dollars away from our communities and our people who need them right here at home. We are the ones who have the power to make change. It takes every single one of our hands, our hearts, and our voices, motivated by this love and aloha, to take on those forces and those obstacles that can seem too great to overcome. There is no force more powerful than love. This is how we come together as Americans. This is why we fight for the future that we hope will be so much brighter for those that we care about, for the country that we love.